Rachel Connors, a strikingly beautiful 53-year-old woman, had built her fortune in the high-stakes world of pharmaceutical innovation. Her company was a leader in cutting-edge cancer research, and Rachel was known for her sharp intellect and unyielding ambition. She navigated life with the poise of someone who always got what she wanted, whether in the boardroom or in her personal life. 22-year-old Ethan Carter, with his rugged good looks, seemed an unlikely match for the polished Rachel. A college dropout with a troubled past, Ethan had drifted through a series of dead-end jobs before a chance encounter with Rachel altered the course of his life. Their relationship, while unconventional, appeared to offer both parties what they desired. For Rachel, a vibrant young companion to stave off loneliness, and for Ethan, financial security and a taste of luxury he had never known. For nearly a year, their arrangement flourished in the shadows of Westlake, but as summer gave way to autumn, a shift in their delicate dynamic would set in motion a chain of events that would end in bloodshed, leaving the community to grapple with the dark undercurrents that had been flowing beneath its pristine surface all along. Rachel Connors' path to wealth and power began in the middle-class suburbs of Boston. Born to a high school chemistry teacher and a librarian, young Rachel showed an early aptitude for science and an insatiable curiosity about the human mind. Her parents, recognizing her potential, scrimped and saved to provide her with every educational opportunity they could afford. At 16, Rachel's life took a dramatic turn when her science fair project on cellular regeneration caught the eye of a visiting professor from Harvard. Impressed by her precocious talent, he became her mentor, guiding her through accelerated studies and into the prestigious biochemistry program at Harvard. It was here that Rachel's ambition truly took flight. During her graduate studies, Rachel's research into gene therapy attracted the attention of several pharmaceutical startups. By 27, she had secured her first patent and launched a fledgling company focused on developing innovative cancer treatments. Under Rachel's leadership, the company thrived, its stock price soaring as breakthroughs in the technology made headlines. With each success, Rachel's wealth and influence grew. So did her reputation for ruthlessness. Former colleagues spoke in hushed tones of her ability to charm and manipulate, to identify weaknesses and exploit them mercilessly. Rachel's personal life was marked by a series of short-lived marriages, each ending as her partners found themselves unable to compete with her true passion, her work. Her first husband, a fellow researcher she met at Harvard, lasted 3 years before filing for divorce, citing emotional neglect. The second, a charming venture capitalist, made it to year 5 before Rachel's suspicions of his infidelity led to an acrimonious split. After her third divorce at 50 from a younger art dealer who claimed she had become obsessively controlling, Rachel swore off traditional relationships. Instead, she began to seek out the company of much younger men, drawn to their vitality and the uncomplicated nature of purely transactional arrangement. It was a lifestyle that suited her, allowing her to maintain control while satisfying her needs for companionship and physical intimacy. Yet, as Rachel approached her mid-50s, a creeping sense of loneliness began to gnaw at her. It was this vulnerability, carefully hidden beneath her polished exterior, that would leave her susceptible to the intoxicating allure of Ethan Carter and the destructive jealousy that would follow. Ethan Carter's early life stood in stark contrast to Rachel's. Born in a small town in rural Pennsylvania, Ethan was the youngest of 4 children in a family perpetually teetering on the edge of poverty. His father, a long-haul trucker with a penchant for alcohol, was rarely home, and his mother, overwhelmed and battling depression, struggled to keep the family afloat. From a young age, Ethan learned to fend for himself. Blessed with good looks and natural charm, he discovered early on that these attributes could be leveraged to his advantage. By high school, Ethan had perfected the art of getting by with minimal effort, relying on his charisma to smooth over his academic shortcomings and disciplinary issues. Despite his lackluster academic performance, Ethan's SAT scores were surprisingly high, hinting at an intelligence he rarely applied to his studies. This, combined with his prowess on the basketball court, earned him a scholarship to a small liberal arts college in Philadelphia. However, the freedom of college life proved too tempting for Ethan. Away from the watchful eyes of his family and high school teachers, he fell in with a party crowd. His grades plummeted, and by the end of his freshman year, Ethan had lost his scholarship. Too ashamed to return home, he decided to stay in Philadelphia, bouncing between low-wage jobs and crashing on friends' couches. It was during this aimless period that Ethan's path intersected with Rachel's. Working as a barista in an upscale cafe frequented by business executives, Ethan caught Rachel's eye one rainy Tuesday morning. She was struck by his easy smile and the hint of vulnerability behind his confident demeanor. For Ethan, Rachel represented everything he thought he wanted: sophistication, success, and the promise of a life far removed from his humble beginnings. Their initial flirtation quickly evolved into something more. Rachel, intrigued by Ethan's raw potential, eager to shape him into her ideal companion, offered him a proposition. She would provide him with financial support and introduce him to her world of luxury and refinement in exchange for his exclusive companionship. Faced with mounting debts and dwindling prospects, the offer seemed too good to refuse. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan accepted Rachel's invitation to accompany her to an art gallery opening. Clear indication that this was more than a casual invitation. The gallery opening marked the beginning of Ethan's induction into Rachel's world. She arrived at his shabby apartment, presenting him with a tailored suit that fit him perfectly. As they moved through the event, Rachel expertly guided Ethan, whispering explanations about the art and introducing him to her circles as her young protege. Ethan, the evening was intoxicating. He found himself easily slipping into the role of the charming artistic young man, feeding off the approving glances and engaging conversations with Rachel's peers. As the night wore on, the attraction between them grew palpable, culminating in a passionate encounter back at Rachel's penthouse. In the afterglow, Rachel laid out her full proposition. She would provide Ethan with a generous monthly allowance, pay for his education if he chose to return to college, and introduce him to opportunities he could only dream of. In return, she expected his companionship, discretion, and exclusivity. Ethan, seeing a chance to reinvent himself and escape his directionless existence, agreed without hesitation. The following months were a whirlwind for Ethan. Rachel moved him into the guest house on her estate, replacing his wardrobe with designer labels and introducing him to the finer things in life. She enrolled him in art appreciation classes, hired a personal trainer to hone his already impressive physique, and taught him the nuances of wine tasting and fine dining. Rachel took immense pleasure in molding Ethan, viewing him as both a project and a prized possession. She reveled in the envious glances they received when they attended events together, proudly showing off her attractive young companion. For Ethan, the relationship offered security and excitement in equal measure. He threw himself into his new role with enthusiasm, eager to prove his worth and maintain the lifestyle to which he was quickly becoming accustomed. Their physical relationship was passionate and adventurous, with Rachel introducing Ethan to experiences he had never imagined. She pushed his boundaries, always maintaining control, a dynamic that spilled over into other aspects of their relationship. As summer turned to fall, Rachel and Ethan settled into a rhythm of lavish vacations, social events, and intimate evenings at home. To the outside world, they appeared to be an unconventional but happy couple. However, beneath the surface, the seeds of codependency and obsession were taking root, setting the stage for the turmoil that was to come. The delicate balance of Rachel and Ethan's relationship began to shift with the arrival of Sophia Langston, 21-year-old art history major at a local university. Sophia entered their lives innocuously enough as a part-time docent at the Museum of Contemporary Art. Ethan first encountered Sophia during one of his frequent visits to the museum, a habit encouraged by Rachel to further his art education. Sophia was leading a tour group, her passion for the artwork evident in her animated descriptions and insightful commentary. Ethan found himself drawn to her enthusiasm, so different from Rachel's calculated appreciation of art as a status symbol. After the tour, Ethan approached Sophia, engaging her in a discussion about the exhibition. Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by shared laughter and a palpable sense of connection. For the first time in months, Ethan felt truly seen for who he was, rather than as an extension of Rachel. Sophia, with her vibrant style and infectious laugh, represented everything that Rachel was not. Where Rachel was polished and restrained, Sophia was spontaneous and expressive. Her youth and energy resonated with Ethan, reminding him of the pure relationships he had sacrificed for his arrangement with Rachel. Over the next few weeks, Ethan found himself visiting the museum more frequently, always managing to time his visits with Sophia's shifts. Their friendship blossomed quickly, bonding over shared interests in art, music, and philosophy. Sophia introduced Ethan to her world of college parties, indie film screenings, and late-night discussions in 24-hour diners. For Ethan, these interactions with Sophia and her friends were a breath of fresh air. He rediscovered parts of himself that had been suppressed in his relationship with Rachel, including his own artistic aspiration. Sophia encouraged him to pursue his interest in photography, even gifting him a vintage camera she had found at a flea market. As Ethan spent more time with Sophia, he began to question the nature of his relationship with Rachel. The stark contrast between the genuine connection he felt with Sophia and the transactional nature of his arrangement with Rachel became increasingly apparent. He found himself manufacturing excuses to spend time away from the estate, his thoughts constantly drifting to Sophia. Unbeknownst to Ethan, his changing behavior and growing distraction had not gone unnoticed by Rachel. Her keen instincts, owned by years of corporate maneuvering, sensed a shift in their dynamic. As Ethan pulled away, Rachel's determination to maintain control over him only intensified, setting the stage for the conflict that would ultimately lead to tragedy. The first signs of trouble were subtle. Rachel noticed Ethan checking his phone more frequently, his face lighting up at certain messages. He began to spend more time at the museum, citing a newfound passion for contemporary art. While Rachel initially encouraged this interest, a nagging suspicion began to take root in her mind. One evening, as they prepared for a charity gala, Rachel casually asked about Ethan's day at the museum. His response was enthusiastic, filled with details about a new exhibition, but it was the mention of Sophia, the incredibly knowledgeable docent, caught Rachel's attention. The way Ethan's eyes sparkled as he spoke of her set off alarm bells in Rachel's head. Determined to uncover the truth, Rachel began to monitor Ethan more closely. She installed a GPS tracker on his phone under the guise of a security upgrade and hired a private investigator to follow him during his outings. The reports she received confirmed her worst fears. Ethan was spending considerable time with a young woman, their body language indicating a clear attraction. As evidence of Ethan's growing connection with Sophia mounted, Rachel's jealousy festered. She oscillated between icy detachment and clingy desperation, her moods becoming increasingly unpredictable. One moment she would shower Ethan with expensive gifts, the next, she would subject him to passive-aggressive comments and veiled threats. Rachel's behavior began to affect her professional life as well. She became distracted during important meetings, snapping at employees for minor infractions. Her assistant noticed an increase in her alcohol consumption, often finding empty wine bottles in her office trash. Unable to contain her suspicions any longer, Rachel confronted Ethan after a particularly late night out. She demanded to know where he had been, accusing him of betraying her trust. Ethan, caught off guard, attempted to downplay his friendship with Sophia, insisting that Rachel was overreacting. The argument escalated quickly, with Rachel reminding Ethan of everything she had done for him and insinuating that he owed her his loyalty. This confrontation marked a turning point in their relationship. Ethan, feeling trapped and resentful of Rachel's possessiveness, began to withdraw further. He became more guarded with his phone, careful not to mention Sophia, and invented elaborate excuses for his absences. Rachel, driven by her growing paranoia, intensified her efforts to control Ethan. She insisted on accompanying him to art events, her possessive body language sending a clear message to anyone who approached them. She surprised him with impromptu visits to the museum, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of the young docent who had captured Ethan's attention. As the weeks wore on, the emotional chasm between Rachel and Ethan widened. Their once passionate encounters became mechanical, tinged with an undercurrent of resentment. Rachel's jealousy morphed into an obsession, consuming her thoughts and driving her to increasingly desperate measures to keep Ethan by her side. Hey crime case solvers! Interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and if you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you would like us to investigate, leave us a comment. Stay safe, crime case solvers. Little did she know that her possessive love was pushing Ethan further away, steering them both towards a confrontation that would have fatal consequences. As Rachel's jealousy intensified, she embarked on a calculated campaign to maintain control over Ethan, drawing on the same strategic thinking that had made her a formidable businesswoman. She deployed a range of manipulation tactics designed to keep Ethan dependent on her and isolated from Sophia's influence. Rachel's first move was to exploit Ethan's financial dependence. She began to withhold his allowance, citing fictitious issues with her accounts or claiming she needed to reallocate funds for business purposes. When Ethan expressed concern, she would relent, but not before extracting promises of increased commitment and time spent together. Emotional manipulation became Rachel's primary weapon. She oscillated between lavishing Ethan with affection and subjecting him to prolonged periods of icy silence. This hot and cold treatment left Ethan constantly off balance, never sure where he stood. Rachel also employed more subtle tactics to isolate Ethan from potential support systems. She scheduled trips that conveniently coincided with plans Ethan had made with friends. She expressed concern about his old acquaintances, implying they were a bad influence or simply using him for his newfound status. Gradually, Ethan's social circle shrank, leaving Rachel as his primary source of companionship and validation. In moments of perceived threat, Rachel would remind Ethan of all she had done for him, framing her controlling behavior as acts of love and generosity. She'd recount how she had rescued him from a life of poverty and obscurity, implying that without her, he would be nothing. These guilt trips served to reinforce Ethan's sense of obligation and indebtedness to Rachel. As Ethan continued to pull away, Rachel's tactics grew more desperate. She began to fake health scares, claiming stress-induced migraines or fainting spells that mysteriously coincided with times Ethan wanted to go out alone. Her performance was so convincing that Ethan often canceled his plans out of genuine concern for her well-being. Through this web of manipulation, Rachel sought to create a reality where Ethan believed he needed her, where his autonomy was slowly eroded until staying with her seemed like the only viable option. Yet with each manipulative act, she was pushing Ethan closer to his breaking point, fueling a resentment that would soon boil over with devastating consequences. During one of her clandestine investigations into Ethan's past, Rachel uncovered a secret that she believed would give her the ultimate leverage. Through her network of private investigators, she learned that Ethan had been involved in a car accident during his freshman year of college. The accident had resulted in a serious injury to another student, but Ethan had fled the scene in a panic. The case had gone cold due to a lack of evidence, but Rachel now held the missing pieces. Armed with this explosive information, Rachel carefully planned her approach. She waited for a moment when Ethan was particularly vulnerable. After a heated argument about his increasing absences, as Ethan turned to leave, Rachel calmly mentioned the accident. Color drained from Ethan's face as he slowly turned back to her. Rachel laid out the facts with cold precision, producing police reports. She made it clear that she possessed enough evidence to reopen the case and implicate Ethan. The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air. Ethan didn't comply with her wishes, she would turn the information over to the authorities. The revelation shattered Ethan. The accident had been the catalyst for his downward spiral in college, the guilt eating away at him for years. He had convinced himself that by leaving his old life behind, he could escape his past. Now that illusion was cruelly stripped away. Rachel pressed her advantage, presenting Ethan with a choice. He could recommit to their relationship, cut all ties with Sophia, and follow Rachel's rules to the letter. Or she would expose his secret, ruining his life, and possibly sending him to prison. Trapped and desperate, Ethan initially agreed to Rachel's demands. He stopped visiting the museum, ignored Sophia's increasingly worried messages, and became a virtual prisoner in Rachel's gilded cage. Rachel reveled in her victory, believing she had finally secured Ethan's unwavering loyalty. However, the weight of the blackmail soon began to take its toll on both of them. Ethan became withdrawn and depressed, his once vibrant personality dulled by the constant stress of living under threat. He went through the motions of their relationship, but the spark that had initially drawn Rachel to him was extinguished. Rachel, for her part, found that her victory left her feeling hollow. The passionate, challenging young man she had fallen for was replaced by a submissive shell. She vacillated between guilt over her actions and frustration at Ethan's listlessness. As weeks passed, tension in the household became unbearable. Ethan's resentment simmered just below the surface, while Rachel's paranoia grew. She became convinced that Ethan was plotting against her, looking for a way to neutralize her leverage. The situation was untenable, a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark would come in the form of a chance encounter, would push Ethan to his limits, and set in motion the final, fatal confrontation between him and Rachel. The catalyst for the final confrontation came on a crisp autumn evening. Rachel had dragged Ethan to a gallery opening, parading him before her peers like a prized possession. As they moved through the crowd, Ethan's eyes locked with a familiar face across the room. It was Sophia, looking striking in a vintage dress. Her presence was a stark reminder of the freedom and genuine connection he had lost. Before Rachel could react, Ethan mumbled an excuse and fled the gallery. He found himself wandering the streets, mind racing. The chance encounter with Sophia had awakened something in him. Fierce desire for freedom, a reminder of the person he once was, could be again. When Ethan finally returned to the estate in the early hours of the morning, he found Rachel waiting for him, face a mask of cold fury. The argument that ensued was unlike any they had before. Ethan, emboldened by his realization and no longer willing to be controlled, confronted Rachel about her manipulation and blackmail. Rachel, sensing she was losing her grip on Ethan, resorted to her final play. She reminded him of the evidence she held, threatening not only to expose his past, but to use her influence to destroy any future he might hope to have. She painted a vivid picture of the ruin that awaited him. He dared to leave her. But instead of cowing Ethan, her threats only served to strengthen his resolve. In a moment of clarity, he realized that no future with Rachel, no matter how luxurious, was worth the price of his soul. With a calmness that belied the turmoil within him, Ethan told Rachel that he was leaving, regardless of the consequence. Rachel, faced with the reality of losing Ethan despite her best efforts, snapped. What happened next would shock the community and change both their lives forever. As Ethan turned to leave, Rachel's composure shattered completely. With a primal scream of rage and desperation, she lunged at him, her manicured nails raking across his face. Ethan, caught off guard by the sudden violence, stumbled backward, knocking over an antique vase that shattered on the marble floor. The sound of breaking porcelain seemed to push Rachel further into a frenzy. She grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the bar cart and swung it at Ethan's head. He ducked, the decanter missing him by inches and smashing against the wall, showering them both with glass and expensive whiskey. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Ethan tried to restrain Rachel, pleading with her to calm down. But Rachel was beyond reason. She clawed at him, kicking and screaming incoherently about betrayal and ingratitude. In the struggle, they careened into Rachel's prized art collection, paintings crashing to the floor around them. As they grappled, Rachel's hand closed around a letter opener on her desk, a wicked, ornate thing that was more weapon than office tool. She plunged it toward Ethan's chest, but he managed to deflect the blow, the blade slicing deeply into his arm, drawing a spray of blood. The sight of blood seemed to momentarily snap Rachel back to reality. She staggered back, the letter opener falling from her suddenly nerveless fingers. Ethan, clutching his bleeding arm, saw an opportunity to escape and made a dash for the door. But Rachel, in a final desperate act, grabbed his injured arm, yanking him back with surprising strength. Ethan, acting on pure instinct and adrenaline, shoved her away hard. Rachel stumbled backward, her heel catching on the rug. Time seemed to slow as she fell, her head striking the corner of the heavy marble fireplace with a sickening crack. Rachel crumpled to the floor, a pool of blood quickly spreading beneath her hair. Ethan stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The room, so recently a scene of chaos, was suddenly terribly still. With trembling hands, Ethan checked for a pulse. Finding none, the realization hit him like a physical blow. Rachel was dead, and his life as he knew it was over. In a daze, he stumbled out of the house into the cool night air, leaving behind a scene of destruction that would soon become the center of a sensational investigation. The grisly discovery was made by Rachel's housekeeper, Elena Ramirez, early the next morning. Her screams upon finding her employer's lifeless body shattered the tranquil morning silence of Westlake, bringing neighbors running and prompting a flurry of calls to 911. Detective Madison Gray, a veteran of the Westlake Police Department's Homicide Division, arrived at the scene within the hour. The opulent living room, now a tableau of violence, told a story of a fierce struggle. Broken glass crunched under her feet as she made her initial survey, noting the overturned furniture, shattered artifacts, and the smears of blood that led to Rachel's body by the fireplace. As crime scene technicians swarmed the house, Detective Gray began piecing together the events of the previous night. Security camera footage showed Ethan fleeing the premises in the early hours of the morning, his shirt stained with blood. His swift disappearance made him the prime suspect, and an all-points bulletin was issued for his arrest. As the investigation progressed, a more complex picture began to emerge. Interviews with staff and acquaintances revealed the tumultuous nature of Rachel and Ethan's relationship. Several witnesses reported hearing frequent arguments and expressed concern about Rachel's increasingly erratic behavior. A breakthrough came when detectives discovered Rachel's hidden files detailing her investigation into Ethan's past. The evidence of blackmail added a new dimension to the case, suggesting that Ethan might have been acting in desperation rather than committing cold-blooded murder. Meanwhile, Ethan remained at large. Sightings were reported across the state, but he managed to elude capture. Turning point in the investigation came from an unexpected source. Sophia Langston, racked with guilt over her role in the events, came forward with crucial information. She provided investigators with text messages and voicemails from Ethan, documenting Rachel's escalating behavior and his growing fear. Sophia's testimony painted a picture of Ethan as a victim of manipulation and abuse, trapped in a gilded cage by Rachel's wealth and threats. This new perspective prompted Detective Gray to dig deeper into Rachel's past, uncovering a pattern of obsessive behavior and allegations of stalking from her previous relationships. Forensic evidence from the crime scene began to corroborate Ethan's version of events. The angle of Rachel's fatal injury was consistent with an accidental fall, and defensive wounds on her hands suggested she had been the aggressor in the final confrontation. Perhaps the most damning evidence came from Rachel's own digital footprint. Thorough examination of her computers revealed the full extent of her surveillance of Ethan, including GPS tracking data and recordings from hidden cameras in their home. The level of invasion and control shocked even the most seasoned investigator. As the true nature of Rachel and Ethan's relationship came to light, public opinion began to shift. The narrative of the gold-digging boy toy gave way to a more nuanced understanding of a young man trapped in an abusive situation. Initially charged with second-degree murder, Ethan's case took an unexpected turn as evidence of Rachel's manipulation and abuse mounted. The district attorney's office faced increasing pressure to reconsider the charges. After lengthy deliberations and negotiations with Ethan's defense team, the charges were reduced to manslaughter. After weeks of testimony and 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict. Ethan was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, a verdict that acknowledged his role in Rachel's death, while also recognizing the extenuating circumstances that led to the fatal confrontation. The judge, taking into account Ethan's lack of prior criminal record and the unusual circumstances of the case, sentenced him to 5 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 3 years. The sentence was met with mixed reactions. Some felt it was too lenient, while others argued that Ethan had already suffered enough.